Hello, I'm Michael Hainsworth. Buried beneath the noise of Chrystia Freeland's abrupt and public departure from the finance file on Parliament Hill with the details of the fall economic statement, Ottawa blew its own deficit target by more than $20 billion, with last year's deficit climbing to $61.9 billion. There's no money for those $250 checks we were promised, but there is a promise aimed at appeasing incoming U.S. President Donald Trump. $1.3 billion for a border security package over 6 years. This is Bill Robson. He is the president and CEO of the C.D. Howe Institute. And before the fall economic statement was released, he had been calling on Freeland to balance the budget. He joins us now. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here, Michael. Thanks for doing the show.
Is it a pleasure, though? This isn't the Christmas present you were hoping for, Bill.
The mess in Ottawa, the mess in federal finances has a number of layers to it. So we'll start where you just did. The deficit for the current fiscal year is now projected to be much higher than it was. What really jumps out at me is that the deficit in the year that ended March 31st of 2024 is now so much larger than what the government said it would be. Spending in that fiscal year was nearly $20 billion higher than what they said it would be. And the significance of that, aside from it being an amount of money that once upon a time and not that long ago we would have said was an astonishing amount of money to suddenly discover you were spending and borrowing. That fiscal year end, March 31st, is actually before the federal government introduced it. That was all but wrapped up when the federal government was preparing the spring budget. So between the budget and the fall update, the previous fiscal year now has that much more spending and that much more red ink. So one of the things that you have to ask yourself is, well, okay, so now they're telling us what the numbers are going to be for this year. But with a record like that, it's anybody's guess what the numbers will eventually be. The other thing going, just as I said, there's a number of layers to this mess. I'll just poke down one layer on that subject. We don't yet have the public accounts for the year that ended March 31st. Now, when you're in the middle of December and you still don't have the public accounts for the year that ended way back at the end of March, there's got to be a problem. The federal government has been slow releasing its public accounts, increasingly slow over time. But I wonder if there's some story to be investigated here about why the public accounts still aren't out, why there's all that additional spending and the larger deficit. Is there something that the Auditor General is having trouble swallowing? Is there a problem with the numbers? So, Chrystia Freeland's resignation really kind of created this big, the political fireworks. But in the meantime, the fall economic statement itself almost raises as many questions as it answered.
Ottawa insists, though, that the spike was tied to one-time costs, like earmarking money for Indigenous claims. Does that jibe with your numbers?
It's a plausible explanation for what happened, but it's not a one-off. They've been doing that now several years in a row. In fact, in 2021, they reopened the books after the Auditor General had signed off. She had initially signed in September. For whatever reason, I don't know how that conversation went. It can't have been an easy one, but she ended up signing a second set of statements much later. And in fact, they didn't release the public accounts that year until December. And they had backdated a lot of spending. Now, if these things are truly one-off, then yeah, okay, you can say, I guess, stuff happens. But we've now had several years in a row where these very large amounts of money are getting pushed into spending. It's not really obvious what they're for. They're kind of contingent liabilities. As I say, once upon a time, $10 billion would have been an eye-popping amount of money that would have attracted attention. Now we don't even have the public accounts, or at least the last I checked. the way things are happening in Ottawa, you never know. Maybe they'll have slid them under somebody's door at some point this afternoon. But we need some answers to what's going on there, because a one-off is a one-off if it's one-off. But if you're seeing it year after year, you can't any longer maintain that there's anything extraordinary about this. If they're shoveling money into this kind of contingent liability that is expected someday to be paying out, tens of billions of dollars, Parliament should have a say about that. We should just be allowing it to suddenly appear in the public accounts. Like if they knew it was going to happen, because it had happened so many times in the recent past, we'll put it in the budget then, and then we'll vote it at the beginning of the year, not have it sprung on us at the end of the year.
The last time you and I spoke about Freeland's file, you urged the now former finance minister two things. One, to balance the budget, which of course we now know didn't happen. But two, to avoid gimmicks. I think Don Drummond and you had described this as junk food. She pushed back on what she reportedly called gimmicks. There must be some good news. I'm looking for a silver lining.
Mm-hmm. Well, better late than never, I suppose. But gimmicks have been a bit of a stock in trade for a while. And to spread the blame more widely, I mean, we're seeing the same type of thing from other governments as well. It seems like it's the flavor of the times to have this kind of populist, giveaway stuff. The GST holiday did go through. That, to me, is fiscal junk that governments are pushing. It's such a silly kind of boost to consumption. At all kinds of cost of time and expense and hassle for retailers. But we'll take what we can get on the fiscal front. The $250, even as originally proposed, was a very expensive thing. It's comparable to the defense budget in size. That's how big it is for the amount of money that they were talking about putting out. And of course, the opposition parties, or some of the opposition parties, immediately said that it should go to even more people. So I'm very glad that she pushed back on that. I was very glad that it's not in the fall statement. But of course, there's a spring budget still to come with a finance minister that might be a bit more favorable towards gimmicks. So, it's a bit of a silver lining, but the cloud is very large. And it really is, just going to the larger thing of a finance minister resigning the morning before delivering a fall update. I guess the only thing that would be more spectacular would be a finance minister resigning right before delivering a spring budget. But it is an unprecedented thing, and it's a remarkable thing. Canadians are sort of commendably calm about these things. Maybe we're even a little phlegmatic. But the chaos in Ottawa really isn't anything like we've seen in decades. And when a government is in this kind of trouble, they can do an awful lot of damage, and not just fiscal damage, but certainly what we're talking about right now with all these tens of billions of dollars of spending that are just suddenly happening and not being properly accounted for. We're going to be carrying the extra debt load and also the damage that's been done to the whole budget making process for a long time to come.
You touched on something that piqued my curiosity about Freeland's replacement in finance being possibly more amenable to gimmicks. With your history of following the goings-on on Parliament Hill, is that a common thing where the new person put in the position at the top is more likely to be swayed by the PMO than less when someone's been in the file for a while and has managed to figure out what they can and can't get away with?
Well, it certainly does take time to find your feet in any cabinet post, and the Minister of Finance is in a particularly tough situation because often you're the person at the table who's saying no to spending that everybody else wants to do. The whole way that Westminster-style governments work, this is true in the UK and other countries with our system of government as well as it is here, is that we've seen this very pronounced centralization of power within prime ministers' offices, within premiers' offices, where the staffers are very focused on communications. They're kind of in permanent campaign mode. And what that does is it creates a much more difficult environment for a minister of finance to operate in, because there's almost like a separate chain of command going through the staffers that could sometimes leave you out of the loop. Bill Morneau, in his book, after he left cabinet, the previous finance minister that Justin Trudeau lost talked about agreeing on policy with the prime minister, only to find out that the prime minister was announcing something the next day that was quite different. So, to the extent that Chrystia Freeland was able to push back on some of this stuff successfully, you do have to worry that the next finance minister will be more amenable, as you said, to what comes out of the PMO. After all, why would the prime minister make that choice? The question now is the larger environment in which they're operating. Are people still prepared to put up with this kind of thing, to report on these goodies as though this is just kind of a normal way for governments to behave? Or are Canadians, after 10 years of very irresponsible fiscal policy that's clearly undermining investment and productivity growth and living standards, are people now at the point where they're going to say enough of this? This type of, just doubling down on gimmicks each time is actually taking us in entirely the wrong direction and demanding something better from this government or from the next government.
I'm still looking for silver linings to this cloud. By at least one metric, the federal debt-to-GDP ratio remained at about 42%, certainly better than America at 123%. Yeah. Is this enough to raise a glass of eggnog at this time of year?
Well, we can certainly raise a glass of eggnog, but the people who we should be toasting with that glass of eggnog are Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin, and then Stephen Harper and Jim Flaherty and Joe Oliver, because those are the teams of prime ministers and finance ministers that put us in a position where our debt ratio is so much better than that of the United States and that of many other G7 countries. So it's true that Canada's overall fiscal situation is relatively good, but no thanks to the current government. One of the reasons that the debt ratio looks as good as it does is because we had this great big bout of inflation that raised GDP. It's a nominal dollar measure. But the other thing that troubles me about that, and I'm sorry to be continually tarnishing your silver lining, is that we know that the debt to GDP ratio is not an effective constraint on what the government decides to do. It is a number that you calculate after the fact, and then if it's in your favor, you say, oh, look, we're doing the right thing here. If it's not in your favor, then what you do is you just say, oh, well, in the next year and the year after that, it's going to be falling. When you're actually making a decision in the PMO or around the cabinet table, if we get back to a cabinet system of government one day, the debt ratio is no kind of a constraint. If you have a balanced budget, it's like a business, it's like a household, it's like a not-for-profit organization like the C.D. Howe Institute. You got a bottom line target. If somebody wants to spend $1, you automatically have that conversation. Okay, well, where will you not spend $1, or how will you get an additional $1 of revenue to cover that? That type of conversation is not happening in Ottawa nowadays, and there's no way a debt-to-GDP ratio target or guideline or guardrail or whatever you want to call it is going to have the same effect that it would if you said, we're headed for zero in, say, the third year of the projections, and so anytime you want to spend an extra $1, you got to explain how you're going to cover the cost of that. That conversation has to happen if you're going to make sensible spending decisions. It's not happening in Ottawa today.
Freeland reportedly wanted to keep the powder dry for the inevitable impact Donald Trump's 25% tariffs will have on our economy. What does this statement tell you about the state of our finances to do so?
Well, we're undermining our capacity to do things at the federal level. The accounting logic behind all of these numbers that we're talking about is the bottom line is intended, and this is what the people who design public sector accounting standards have in mind when they're setting out the standards, is a government's capacity to deliver services improving or deteriorating. If your bottom line is positive, a government's capacity to deliver services is improving. If the bottom line is negative, then your capacity to deliver services is deteriorating. One of the things that Donald Trump is putting much more squarely in front of us is that if we don't pull our weight on defense, if we don't have a border that the Americans feel is secure enough that people aren't going to be coming across it that they don't want, drugs and other things aren't going to be coming across it they don't want, that's going to require resources. And the federal government has been very bad at allocating money to defense and actually spending it. So to see our fiscal capacity undermined in this way is disturbing. The bright lining, if you want, from my perspective, is that the federal government has been spending so carelessly for so long that you could do a lot of things that would not cause the average Canadian to notice a deterioration in services. The federal public service headcount has grown by more than a third. To what effect? It's not helping them process passports any faster. It's not helping them process immigration any faster. It's not helping them process our taxes any faster. So in fact, I think you can do a lot of savings. I think we won't probably see it under this government, but the next government, it's going to be a tough slog because there's going to be a lot of opposition to it. But there are literally tens of billions of dollars of saving to be had. A balanced budget is not that far out of reach. You just need a government that is prepared to say we're going to hold the line on spending. We're going to really focus on delivering services as opposed to making nice announcements and just hiring people for the sake of, I don't know what, to create more public servants who will vote for you in the next election. Doesn't seem to be working. It's doable. And I think the next government is going to find that it's going to be a tough job in many ways, but they can be successful. Calling for a balanced budget after what we've just been through can seem like a stretch, but when you look at how spending has exploded and to what purpose, it's actually not that hard to do.
There appears to be some investment-friendly line items in this mini budget, if you want to call it that. Will spending $17.4 billion to extend the accelerated investment incentive help?
Well, it does help. The problem with what we did when the first Trump tax cuts happened, that 2017 package, was Canada thought that accelerating depreciation on certain types of investment was really going to be an effective answer. We've now had a lot of years pass since that 2017 tax reform in the United States. And it seems to have been very effective at encouraging investment in the United States and encouraging U.S. companies that had previously been keeping their earnings abroad to avoid tax to bring their earnings back into the United States and raise investment there. The other thing that's happening in the United States is that the personal income taxes in the United States at the top end are a little lower than they are in Canada, especially in the states that don't have any state income taxes, but they cut in at a much higher level. So Canada right now is at a competitive disadvantage when it comes to taxes on business investment and taxes on people. One of the things that I would really like to see the federal budget in better shape to do is to relieve us a little bit of that tax burden so that talented people and companies that are wondering where to put the next dollar of investment aren't as likely to pick the United States over Canada. Donald Trump is I think his volatility in many respects is a studied thing. Maybe it's impulsive that he's learned over a lifetime of doing these kinds of negotiations. He knows that even if the tariffs don't ultimately get put in place, that the uncertainty that he's creating is tipping the scale in favor of somebody who's wondering where in North America to invest in the United States. It's the bigger market. Why risk being on the wrong side of a border that might get thicker and harder to ship across? So in Canada, we have to be thinking extending the accelerated depreciation certainly helps because it means that we're not going to suddenly be, handicapped in a new way. But if you want to make for a more investment-friendly and growth-friendly environment, you really have to get your tax rates down as well. So yes, that was helpful. But is it all we need to do? No, it's not all we need to do.
All right, last attempt at finding the silver lining. The Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Incentive Program, unfortunately referred to as SHRED, got a $1.1 billion spending boost. You've been pretty fair to middling on this incentive in the time that we've been speaking.
Yeah, the SHRED is a program that has a lot of odd features when it comes to the challenge of not just incenting research, but to have businesses that then commercialize the research and grow successfully. So to expand the eligibility for the SHRED, as the government is doing, is actually helpful because you can think of it as a little bit like a welfare wall. We know that there are all kinds of clawbacks of income for people that can make it very discouraging to find work or to have more hours of work. Similarly, with the SR&ED, the way it's designed, there are a lot of disincentives for companies to grow or to become public companies. So a change that makes the thing a little bit more widely eligible is not a bad idea. But one of the things that we ought to be thinking about is just like, how do you encourage businesses to grow and commercialize more in Canada? Well, a lower corporate income tax rate would actually be a really great tonic for that, because it applies to everybody. The SR&ED, they've widened eligibility, but still only certain companies are eligible, and the companies up to a certain size doing certain types of activity. If you've got the lower corporate tax rate, then to use a hackneyed cliche, the market decides rather than the government. So yes, it's a silver lining. They have done a few things right, but you'd really need the fiscal framework to be in better shape, because I think and here I am, I'm sorry, we'll see if we can come up with another silver lining before we run out of time. But one of the problems with what happened yesterday in Ottawa is that you would have to be a very courageous person. I already talked about, would you place a bet on the fiscal outcome for the current year being anywhere close to what they said, when we've just seen the previous fiscal year get totally restated. It's very difficult for anybody right now to look at the policy environment and say, okay, well, now we got some stability, we've got some certainty, we know what we can count on here. So there's a lot to be done before we're going to be able to recover our confidence here. So yes, a few things got done. It's clear that there are people within the Department of Finance, I doubt some of that stuff came out of the PMO, who are thinking about long-term prospects for the country, what makes economic growth tick. Maybe a couple of battles won by the Deputy Minister of Finance, whose life must have been extraordinarily complicated over the last little while. Maybe we are gradually going to change the channel. Maybe it's not going to be like a bolt out of the blue where all of a sudden we do a 180 and start to do a whole lot of things differently. Canada's a bit more of an incremental country. So when you see a few things that you like in the statement, you have to say, okay, well, let's try and nail those things down. And then the stuff that wasn't there, the giveaways, we still haven't seen legislation on the inclusion rate increase on the capital gains tax. Maybe that's not going to happen either. We just need a little bit more decision-making at that granular level that takes us in the right direction, and give up on these gimmicks that didn't work for the previous finance minister, and I don't think have worked for the country, and they haven't even worked for the government.
So in light of the holiday season, and I suppose apologies to Dr. Seuss, if there were three words that best describe the fall economic statement, would they be as follows, and I quote, stink, stank, stunk?
Yeah, well, it's in the past, and the Grinch story is a redemption story. So it's in the spirit of the season and what happened with Scrooge's change of heart and the Grinch's change of heart. Let's see if this is a signal that we've really reached the end of the road, both economically and politically, when it comes to the kind of fiscal policy we've had, and that this time next year we're going to be singing a happier tune.
Well, from your mouth to all the ears of Whoville. Bill, thank you so much for your time and insight.
You too. Thanks.
Bill Robson is the president and CEO of the C.D. Howe Institute. For further insight into the fall economic statement, the state of Canada's finances, and recommended policy direction, visit cdhowe.org. I'm Michael Ainsworth. Thanks for joining us.
You've been listening to the C.D. Howe Institute podcast with Michael Ainsworth. Subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. The C.D. Howe Institute is an independent, not-for-profit research institute whose mission is to raise living standards by fostering economically sound public policies. The Institute is widely considered to be Canada's most influential think tank and a trusted source of essential policy intelligence, distinguished by nonpartisan, evidence-based research and subject to definitive expert review. Visit cdhowe.org and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you.